All right, welcome everybody to Learn to Foundation Paper Piece with Carolina Moore. My name is Dana. I'm the editor of Fave Crafts, and I will be emceeing today's class. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording this webinar, so you will get a copy of that recording in your email from Zoom in about 24 hours. So keep an eye out if you would like to re-watch. If you have questions throughout the webinar, you can drop them in the chat. The chat tends to move quickly, so you can also ask them in the Q&A feature, and then it's helpful if you ask in the Q&A feature because then they're separated in that way. I will go ahead and introduce Carolina, and I want to thank her for sponsoring today's class. Carolina Moore Patterns is today's sponsor. Carolina is an award-winning quilter, craft, and sewing book author, and the inventor of quilting notions. She brings her creative flair when she designs quilt patterns. Each pattern is written and fully illustrated to support different learning modalities. Many of the tools used in her patterns have detailed instruction videos on her popular YouTube channel. Raised with traditional quilting techniques and traditional quilting patterns, Carolina loves adding modern colors, fabrics, and design in her patterns. She's an art gallery fabric socialite, baby lock influencer, and has been blogging for over a decade at Always Expect More. I'll spotlight two of her newest products that we're promoting today are her foundation piecing water pen and her precision tweezers. The foundation piecing water pen makes it easy to remove the papers from your foundation paper piecing, and the precision tweezers were designed to pull foundation papers from foundation paper piecing specifically. You can learn more about these products and see all of the products that she has to offer at carolinamorepatterns.com. And I will drop that link into the chat. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop our screen share. All right. And Carolina, when you are ready, we are in business.
Feedback, and there we go, in just a second.
Sure.
All right. Hi, I'm Carolina Moore, and I'm so excited to be here today to share foundation paper piecing with all of you and all of you who are watching the recording as well. Foundation paper piecing, so quilters, we have this habit of if someone tells us that something is hard, then we believe that it's hard, and then we tell other people that it's hard. And then other people believe that it's hard and they share with other quilters that it's hard. And then people don't want to try it because they've all had this rumor that something is hard. And foundation paper piecing is not hard at all. There are actually quite a few quilters who like to take traditional piecing patterns and turn them into foundation paper piecing patterns, because foundation paper piecing allows you to be super, super accurate with where all your points are. And it controls any stretch in your fabric, which is beautiful, especially when you're working with wonky angles and creative angles. So today we're using a really simple pattern, and it's this one right here. So hopefully you already have it printed out. If not, we can get you the link. But this is the North Star block. It is free on my site. So this is a free pattern, and this is 1/4 of the star. There are two different sizes of this pattern. This is the 12-inch block because you'll put 4 of these together to make a 12-inch block. There's also a 6-inch block with 3-inch versions that you'll put together to make a 6-inch block. And I actually started last week this fun project here where I took my North Star blocks and I started putting them on a hoodie so that I can actually wear these blocks out. And this still needs pockets added and some fabric in the hood, but then I will have a fun hoodie that I can use and wear my quilting out. This is a different video that I have on my YouTube channel. If you search Carolina Moore Quilted Hoodie, you find this one. So today we're doing a really simple block that can be done with foundation paper piecing. But once you learn this technique, the sky is the limit. There are so many fun designs and patterns. There are so many designers out there designing specifically foundation paper pieced patterns. And I had one that just launched last month and I just got it back so I can share it with you. I'm super excited. This is the wildflower bouquet quilt. So this is much more advanced pattern, but once you know the basics of foundation paper piecing, so here's the bottom, it's not all going to fit in the frame. And this is all florals done with foundation paper piecing. So once you understand the basics of just flipping, which we're going to go over today, then the sky's really the limit with the really stunning and amazing designs that you can do with quilting. Because when people see pictures of that quilt, they say, oh my gosh, is that fabric? Yeah, it's just fabric. Fabric that has been stitched through paper so you can get all of your angles exact and perfect. Okay, so I'm going to flip the camera down a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. But if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and we'll get those questions answered. I won't be able to see the screen as much though, so I'm sure Dana will be able to shout out those questions for me. For a little bit of fun today, I did bring out my sparkly baby lock that I blinged earlier this year just for fun. It does actually sew. And we're going to start with our templates. So the first thing with the templates is that you can print them on regular copy paper, but the more garbage paper you use, the better. So if it has a higher recycled content, amazing, because it's going to rip easier, which we're going to do on a later step. I love for the tearing, Carol Doak foundation paper. This feels just like newsprint, and I do sell this in my shop, but it feels just like newsprint and it tears as easily as newsprint. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just grab one template, or well, for this step you can go through multiple templates, that's fine. And I know you're not supposed to cut paper with your rotary cutter, but I do switch out my blades regularly. So if you have a rotary blade that has been designated for cutting paper, that's great to do here. And I'm not cutting on my lines. I'm giving myself a little bit of margin, but I don't need all of this paper in the way when I'm sewing. So I'm just going to cut away a bunch of the extra. And you could do this with scissors as well if you don't want to cut paper with a rotary cutter. I have a friend coming to visit. This is Cupid. Hi, Cupid. This is not a good spot for you. This is definitely not a good spot for you. All right, we're going to move you. You can move yourself. That works too. Cupid is 2 years old and she loves hanging out while I'm quilting. I think she's trying to make it up into the window where the bird feeder is. Okay, so that's all trash. And now we just have this cut down to a little bit of a smaller piece. Now you'll see on the paper that all of the different areas have been designated with numbers and letters. For our full block, we need to make 4 of the exact same. So we'll be making 4 A blocks, and that's why these have been designated with A. Then this tells us what order to put our fabrics down. A1, A2, A3, A4, A5. So that's the order that we're going to put our fabrics down, and that's what the numbers mean. If you have a more complicated pattern, you might have an A unit, a B unit, a C unit, a D unit, an E unit, and going all the way through. I have the so the wildflower bouquet quilt has K sections, and each section has like KA, KB, KC. So sometimes you'll see 2 letters and then a number, but you just want to know what letter section you're working on. So that's this section, and then the numbers. This one has all of your colors indicated, but you don't have to follow the colors exactly as indicated here on the block. If you wanted this to look more like a bird of paradise flower, you could do these in like pinks or yellows and oranges, whatever colors you want. This is your quilt and you get to design it how you want and use whatever colors you want, and that's what makes it yours. Okay, so now we're going to get started with putting our fabric on here. Now it can be handy to have a light table underneath here so that you can see exactly where your fabrics are, or you can hold it up against a window. And the other thing that you can also do is you can grab your cell phone and just turn the light on your cell phone, just the camera light like this, and that can also help you see underneath. So we'll do that in a second. Okay, so I think I'm going to use, so I grabbed just a bunch of different fabrics as options. You can see this one would, nope, it would still be too small even to use in the smallest section here. So these 5-inch squares are going to be too small to use here because you want your fabric to extend past this gray line over here. So you definitely want it past there, and that would cut off here. So this fabric is not going to work. It actually would cut off down there too. Okay. So this one though, I have plenty of fabric, so this will work as my blue. If I wanted to make my whole quilt super scrappy, I could use a different blue in each spot. I think I'm going to use the same one. And I love this yellow in part because it also has some of that blue. So I think it'll look really good together. But these are my choices, and you can absolutely use whatever choices you want. Dana, while I start cutting these down, are there any questions from anyone so far?
Somebody asked, what did you use to bling out your sewing machine?
I used rhinestones that I got on Amazon, and then I used Beacon Gem Tack to glue them all down. Awesome. And I have all of that on Instagram and on TikTok.
And then Diana's asking about how many pieces of paper are cut at the same time.
I cut through, I think like 6 or 8 because that's what I printed. No, I think it was 7 because one printed wonky. So I think I cut through 7 pieces. But just whatever you're comfortable cutting through. Okay. So I'm just cutting these pieces down. It doesn't have to be super perfect. You want it bigger than the sections you're going to stitch. And when you're really new, go ahead and cut them extra big. So this is extra big. It wouldn't need to be this big, but cut them extra big as you get used to it, because there's nothing worse than not having your fabric cover the whole area. Okay, so here is where foundation paper piecing gets its magic. What we're actually looking at here with the paper is the back of the quilt block. So if you were ever to foundation paper piece letters, you'd see them in reverse here. They'd be backwards. Or if you, I don't know, we're trying to do a foundation paper piecing of someone's face, this would be their face in mirror image, not the front of their face, because the front is where the fabric is going to be, which is the back of the paper, right? So this is the back of our quilt block. So now what we're going to do is we're going to lay our A1 paper, or our A1 piece of fabric on here. And it's right over here. And this is where your light table can come in handy because you can see through. See, I placed this against A3, so that's the wrong side. I want to lay it against the A1 side. And now you can flip this, hold up against a window. In this case, we can put a light behind it to see, okay, where does the fabric end? To know, okay, yes, that's all lined up. And now I want my A2. Now your A1, we put behind this A1 square. The A2 and every subsequent piece after this is actually getting lined up with the line between A1 and A2. Because when we flip it, and you'll see in a second, when we flip it, we want it to cover A2. So now we're going to do that right sides together. An easy way to kind of catch that line is to give yourself a fold right here. And if you want, we can already go ahead and grab our add a quarter ruler, line it up with that line, and use that to give ourselves a crease so we know where we need to line up. Okay, so we're going to flip this over. And we're going to put our A2 piece right sides together, making sure to give ourselves at least a 1/4 inch seam allowance past that line. Let me get my needle up on my sewing machine here.
So Carolina, it looks like the first piece of fabric is wrong sides together with the paper, and then the second piece is right sides together.
Yep, so your 2 pieces of fabric are going to be right sides together.
Okay,
you
great.
Want your fabric right sides together, just like we would always do when sewing.
Thank you.
But the first piece of fabric is right side down because, again, the front of our paper is the back of our quilt block. Okay. The fun thing about this machine is that I chose the most basic baby lock to bling out, so it doesn't have a needle threader. So I'm gonna need my readers on to be able to thread this needle. Any other questions? Go ahead and feel free to ask. Okay, come here.
Jill was asking, how do you do paper piecing by hand?
So English paper piecing is a completely different technique. And I teach that as well. But English paper piecing and foundation paper piecing, they're both paper piecing techniques, but they are wildly different. English paper piecing is done by cutting apart all of the individual shapes and then piecing together, wrapping the fabric around the shapes and then piecing together the fabric wrapped papers. Okay, so we have our fabric together. My machine's all ready to go. I'm going to pick this up to not shift my fabric as much as I can. Come here, there we go. And we're going to stitch on this line between A1 and A2, starting at least a 1/4 inch before the line and ending at least a 1/4 inch after. So I'm going to take this over to my machine. I'm going to put my presser foot down and then make sure, can you see? Yeah, you can see. Okay. So now I'm just going to stitch. And because we're stitching through paper, you may want to reduce your stitch length by 1 or 2, just to make it a little bit shorter. And the reason we want to make that stitch length a little bit shorter is because when we tear out the paper, we don't want to put a lot of stress on our seam. Okay, before we do any cutting here, we want to flip this over and double check. And we can do this by holding it up to a light or a light table and make sure that this yellow fabric will completely cover A2. And it will, so we did a good job. We don't have to rip anything out. And now we're just going to fold our paper back and out of the way. And using our add a 1/4 ruler. And the reason we're using an add a 1/4 ruler is it has a little lip here on the back end. And that lip catches that paper. So you can see it just grabs right there. And that makes it really easy to cut this down to a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. Because we don't want all the extra bulk of this fabric hanging out on the back of our quilt. So now we're going to flip this over. And I usually finger press these if I'm not doing a ton of them. If I'm doing a ton of them, then I grab my seam roller and I use my seam roller to press these. But I'm just going to go ahead and finger press these since we're just doing 1 block today. And now you can see we have A1 and A2 on there. So now we have A3. That's our next big piece. We'll go ahead and cut off a piece of fabric that is at least big enough for A3. And we're going to do the same thing. Now, what some people like to do here to make sure that they're lining up A3 where it needs to go is they'll actually take the paper, pull it up, and fold on that line already. And already trim this down to a 1/4 inch. And that lets you know exactly where you need to line up this next piece. So now, again, fabric is always going to go right sides together. And then when you want to give yourself a double check, especially at angles, I'm going to bring this a little closer, you can see. So hopefully you can see right here, I didn't go all the way to the edge, and that's really easy to do when you're doing an angle like this. So I need to bring this up further. I'll double check it again real quick. Okay, that looks like it'll be good. So now I can bring this to my sewing machine and I can stitch again on the line. And I don't know if anyone noticed, I don't even have a 1/4 inch foot on my sewing machine. Oh, I felt that shift. Okay, let me try that one more time. But I don't have a 1/4 inch foot on my sewing machine because you don't need one. You don't need a 1/4 inch foot. You're not sewing anything at a 1/4 inch. You're always just sewing everything on the line. And so again, we're going between the A2 and the A3 line. that line extends all the way up to A1 as well, and that's okay. And stitching at least a 1/4 inch before and at least a 1/4 inch after. My thread got a little wrapped around my presser foot there. There we go, smooth that out.
Carolina, Diana is asking, could you use stick glue to hold the paper in place until sewing?
Yes, you can use like a little glue stick to hold it in place. Absolutely.
Cool. And then Jill is asking, can you use muslin that stays in the quilt? She has an old piece of muslin that has black pieces printed on it, like having the blocks by the yard.
So that would be really similar to, instead of having a foundation paper, you have foundation fabric. So it's the same kind of thing. Absolutely. Because back in the day, foundation paper piecing is not a new technique, but back in the day, people didn't have printers, right? They might have drawn their foundation patterns on paper, or they could have them on fabric. Okay, so now we're going to open this one up. I trimmed off that 1/4 inch seam allowance, open it up. Yep, that looks good. Okay, so we've now done A1 to A2. We've added A3. We're going to add A4. Now you're going to notice about A4 that it doesn't go all the way to the end because A5 is going to cover up that bottom. So that's totally fine. We'll do the same thing as before. Pull this up. Use my add a 1/4. Help me line up that fold. And that'll help me line up my next little yellow piece. I'm going to grab my yellow fabric. And I want to make sure that I cut a strip that's going to be long enough. And since this is going at an angle, is this going to be long enough at the angle? And yes, it is. I'm going to go ahead and cut 2 strips already for both A4 and A5. There we go. And then always fabric right sides together. Line it up. Make sure that it goes far enough. It does. And if you were to use like a little glue stick, I would keep it in the seams as much as possible because otherwise you're going to have to pick glue off your fabric later. So a couple dabs of glue in the seam allowance would be fine. And then same thing, we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch before and a 1/4 inch after this line right here.
Katie is asking, you don't need to backstitch.
You do not need to, so with quilting, and my needle come unthreaded. Oh, no, it didn't. Maybe just there at the end. Okay. So you do not need to backstitch with quilting because every single seam that you do gets caught by another seam. I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. Let me get this machine threaded again. So every single stitch that you do gets caught by another one all the way through until you bind your quilt, and binding catches all those last seams all the way around the outside of your quilt. So there's never a seam that is not caught up by another seam. And those cross seams are what lock all your stitches in place. Okay, my machine got unthreaded here at the last bit of this, so I'm going to just sew over that. For this, I will start a little before that thread got caught and go a little before.
I have a couple questions about materials. So Diana's asking, does it matter the grain of fabric for the pieces?
It doesn't, because as you can see, this, I did sew this on the grain, just that's because where I cut my line. but when it goes over it, this fabric will no longer be on grain in the block compared to any of the other fabrics. This fabric, the grain is this direction. This fabric, the grain is in this direction. So the grains all cross one another, which results in a ton of stretch. But we don't care about the stretch so much in foundation paper piecing because we have the paper foundation that is holding all that stretch in place. Okay,
Great.
so now I'm going to fold my paper back again. Trim this down to 1/4 inch with my add a quarter ruler.
Carol says she likes that you don't have to worry about the grain.
Yes, and you don't have to worry about the stretch, which when you're doing some really wild and crazy designs, you would have bias stretch all over the place, and you don't have to worry about that at all. Okay, so now we have just our last one, which is A5. So now what we're doing each time is kind of pulling those stitches up away from the paper to help us be able to place that next piece. Trim up all that extra. And now place our last piece. Double check to make sure that yep, that looks perfect. And we'll be able to stitch this last seam.
Linda is asking, is wax paper no longer recommended for paper piecing?
So wax paper, as far as I know, I've never seen wax paper recommended. Some people use vellum because vellum, you can see through it better. Wax paper, you definitely can't run it through a laser printer. And I don't know if inkjet printer would, the ink from an inkjet printer would go on wax paper, but people have used vellum. It's just more expensive. But vellum is absolutely an option if you want to use that for foundation paper.
How about freezer paper?
So freezer paper is an option. That's another one that you can't run through a laser printer because the plastic on the back of the vellum, or sorry, the freezer paper will gum up your laser printer. So that's a definite no-no. But you can absolutely use foundation paper, or sorry, freezer paper that has been cut to 8.5 by 11 and run it through your printer, your inkjet printer. There is freezer paper that is sold in 8.5 by 11 sizes, but the method is actually a little bit different. So let me demonstrate a little bit here. If this was freezer paper, what would happen is instead of sewing on this line, I would have folded this out of the way and I would have sewn where my right next to the paper on the crease, and then folded this over and then fused it to the freezer paper. So it's a bit of a different technique because you're never sewing through the paper, you're sewing next to the paper lines. Freezer paper is a method where you can reuse your foundations. So once you've learned the standard foundation paper technique, if you want to try with freezer paper, you absolutely can and see if you like that better. I have like hoarding tendencies already. Like I'll keep every little scrap of fabric. So if I have a freezer paper template, I'll probably keep that forever, even if I'm never going to do that quilt again. So it's better for me to just use the papers, be done, toss them, and then I don't have to worry about having all these random freezer paper templates hanging out all over my office. And I don't know. I'll show you in a second the other reason that I like using foundation paper rather than freezer paper. So I'm cutting this to size. This is a 6 inches finished, which means it's getting cut to 6.5, which is a good reminder. At the very beginning, and I apologize because I made sure that I printed these to size before, but on every single page, there is a reference square. Now on every foundation paper piecing project, you'll see that reference square. And you always want to measure that reference square after printing on your ruler to make sure that it is 1 inch, because our printers often default to like a print to page, stretch to fit page, like it'll do different things. And depending on how the page was designed and how much your printer can print to the edge, it will distort your foundation pages. And you don't want that to happen because you want them to fit together beautifully at the end. So every single foundation paper that you print at home will always have a 1 inch reference square that you will measure with a ruler to make sure that it did get printed to size. Often I'll print 1 to double check. And then once I know I have my printer settings right, then I can print the rest to those same printer settings. Okay, so we squared this up, and this is where I love having a traditional foundation that I know that I'm going to tear away versus the freezer paper, is because I usually won't take these papers out yet. I will leave them in until I sew them together, because I have all this bias stretch going on all my edges. And as soon as I take the papers out and then try to sew everything together, I'm going to get bias stretch. So I want to leave my papers in, and with a freezer paper template, you'll actually be tearing it out now rather than leaving it in. And then you're going to deal with that bias stretch when sewing together. So for me, I'd rather have papers that I can leave in, but I want to show you how easy it is to tear these out. So I grabbed a foundation piece and water pen, and this is what it looks like. These are a new product that I launched in February to make tearing the papers out easier. And it has a little felt tip, and you screw these actually counterintuitively open, fill the reservoir with water, and then close it back up. And for fun, I thought I would grab, since we were doing the blinged machine today, I have a couple blinged versions of the foundation piece and water pen, because of course I do. And I thought I would use these to show you how easy it is to just take these papers out. So without the foundation piece and water pen, you would just take your papers and you would sit here and try to rip these out. And it's a bit of a tedious process. It's the thing that people like the least about foundation paper piecing, is having to take the papers out. So I'm going to use my precision tweezers here to help me. I'm trying to pull these out. Yep, it wants to be difficult. Okay, that's why I have the foundation piece and water pen. I just trace a line on all my seams. And now that paper comes out super easy. We've never had it so good. And then sometimes you get little pieces stuck here. So I've got my precision tweezers to go ahead and pull any papers that get stuck in little corners like that, little points. All right, Dana, before we wrap up with any last questions, do we want to do a quick intermission?
Yeah, that would be great. I will go ahead and go back to my slideshow, and then there's a few questions that we can ask after the intermission. All right. Okie dokie. So if folks want to get up and stretch or grab a glass of water, anything like that, feel free. I'm going to talk about an upcoming class that we have scheduled, and then I will also talk about our digital magazine. So we have one class coming up in May so far, and that is Intro to Textural Embroidery. That is with Melissa Galbraith from M Creative J. And she is going to be demonstrating several beautiful textured stitches. She's got a new book coming out about textured embroidery that she'll also talk about during the class. You can sign up for any upcoming classes at favecrafts.eventbrite.com. So that one's on at Tuesday, May 9th, and that's actually at noon Central Time. It's an hour later than our typical classes. We have another class coming up May 23rd, sneak peek, because I don't have promo materials for it yet. That is about blocking knitting and crochet projects. So if anybody in class today is also a knitter or crocheter, you can learn how to block projects. More info coming soon. That will be on May 23rd. And then We Like Sewing Magazine is one of our digital magazines. And as a thank you for attending any of our webinars, we like to offer this special introductory offer for $5 US for an annual subscription to the magazine. We Like Sewing is a new digital magazine. It launched about a year ago. It's entirely online and it publishes 6 times a year. Plus, when you sign up for the magazine, you get access to all of the previously published patterns. It's ads free and all of the patterns are tech edited. So you get a wonderful high quality product for just $5 US if you are a new subscriber. And that link is welikesewing.com/sewing23. All right, so that's it for intermission. Caroline, I've got a couple questions in the chat for you and in the Q&A feature. Diane is asking, how did you bling out your pens?
So I will be doing a video on blinging out the pens because I get a lot of questions on this. I originally did it just for fun. It's kind of a crazy story. And blinging the pens was actually what caused me to bling my machine. So actually bling the pens first. But it is, bling that I got on Amazon, and I'll make sure that when I do that, I will link to it, and Beacon Gem Tech. Yeah, it's pretty simple to do.
Sweet, fantastic. Let's see, someone asked, gotta scroll back a little bit through the chat. Can you place glue between the fabric edges before you turn the project over to sew?
So that was the same question we had before. Like, yeah, you can put a little bit of glue between along your seam allowance so that you can hold it in place. You can also use a couple pins to hold it in place when you're bringing it from your surface to your sewing machine. Generally, when I do projects like this, I have an extension table on my sewing machine, which is fabulous because then I'm not really picking it up and bringing it anywhere. I'm just sliding it over on that extension table. So an extension table is fabulous for this as well.
Awesome. Mindy, I love Mindy's question. She asks, I'm looking at patterns on your website, and is there any way to determine which ones are paper pieced without going through them all?
So most of my patterns are traditionally pieced. Wildflower Bouquet is foundation paper pieced, and that is an exclusive right now. You can only get it through quilt shops. So if you're interested in Wildflower Bouquet, check with your local quilt shop about getting a kit, because the patterns are only in the kits right now that are the Art Gallery fabric kits that make exactly that quilt that I just showed you. Let's see. Most of them will say foundation paper pieced. There's I want to say, a Christmas bell quilt block that's foundation paper pieced. And then there is the Hearts collection. And the Hearts collection I actually have here. I haven't quilted it yet, but I had it here from another project. This is foundation paper pieced, and it is 6 different foundation paper pieced hearts that are all, you can make them as individual wall hangings, or you can make them as a whole quilt. So this one is foundation paper pieced, and all these you can get the blocks individually or as a whole set, and that's foundation paper pieced. But I don't have a ton of foundation paper piecing on my site right now. A lot of it is really traditionally pieced.
Okay, great. There's so many great comments. Susie said she has your water piecing pen, and it's amazing. It's a game changer.
Yeah, I spent 18 months trying to develop like the best way to get foundation papers out of fabric, or ripping out the foundation papers, because it's the worst part. And I bought all kinds of different blades and tools. I was trying like cuticle cutters. I was trying like all kinds of things because like there had to be an easier way. And then I remembered that when we were kids doing origami and we needed to rip the paper for origami, what did we do? We just licked that seam of the paper, that fold in the paper, to rip it. And licking your quilts is not so sanitary, but using a foundation, using water pen, much more sanitary than licking the back of your quilts. So there you go.
Awesome. Let's see. Pamela is asking, with foundation paper piecing, do you find there is more waste or less compared to traditional methods?
I mean, That's like a bigger question because there are so many traditional methods. And foundation paper piecing is a great way to use scraps because you can kind of fit your little scrap pieces to however, whereas with traditional piecing, if you're trying, you need a 6.5 inch square, you need a 6.5 inch square. There's no getting away with it. But like this was one of the pieces that I cut off, and this is still big enough to use in another block in this same spot, right? So you can reuse a lot of your scraps. When I do foundation paper piecing, I do a lot of my bigger blocks first so that all my scraps are bigger, and then I reuse those scraps later in the quilt and later in the quilt. So like there might be a little more waste depending on your skill level in it. But there's always like a robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of situation of, yes, you'll have a little more waste. At least I definitely have a little more waste than with traditional piecing, but my accuracy is so much better. And the kinds of projects that I get to make with foundation paper piecing, there's no way that I would be able to do them with traditional piecing.
Awesome. A few people are asking where to get the pens, so you guys can get them at Carolina Moore Patterns. Somebody asked, are they available on Amazon, or everyone should just go through your site?
The pens are not on Amazon. There are a lot of quilt shops that carry them. There are quite a few quilt shops that have brought them in already. So you can always check with your local quilt shop. I'm a huge fan of local quilt shops. So feel free to check your local quilt shop. Say, I saw this thing. It's called a foundation piecing water pen. You might not know what this means, but you can tell the shop it's available at all 4 major distributors. So shops buy their stuff from distributors often. So they can get it, whatever distributor they order from, they'll carry the foundation piecing water pen. So they can special order them in for you, and that way you can support your local shop. If you don't have a local shop or your local shop isn't up for doing special orders, then you can absolutely order them through my site, carolinamorepatterns.com.
Awesome. Linda is asking, can you use paper piecing for a scrappy quilt without a pattern?
So a really similar method to paper piecing for a scrappy quilt without a pattern would be to use scrap tape. I have a video on my YouTube on scrap tape. I sell scrap tape in my shop. It is one of my favorite products out there. The 2.5 inch scrap tape is out of stock in my shop right now, but I just got a shipping notification, so I'll have it back in next week. And you can also ask if your shop will special order scrap tape if it's something that you're happy or something that you're interested in. But it comes on a roll where you use the same kind of stitch and flip method to add scraps to scrap tape and then trim it up. And then you can make really gorgeous scrappy quilts using scrap tape.
Sweet. All right. Linda's asking, does foundation paper piecing for a regular block quilt take less time or more time than traditional piecing?
So for me, because I've been quilting for over 30 years, I started when I was 12. I can traditionally piece a block super fast. For me, there's quite a few people, you can kind of look at a pattern, and once you have the cutting instructions, you just zip it together, like sewing it together. You don't even need to follow the pattern. The pattern was really for the cutting instructions, and you just make the quilt. Foundation paper piecing has more steps, right? I have to do all the flipping. I have to print the papers. If it wasn't designed as foundation piecing, I have to convert the pattern from traditional piecing to paper piecing. So for me, I find traditional piecing faster, but for someone who gets really frustrated about their points not matching and is ripping out a project over and over again because things aren't matching the way that they want it to, they might say, well, for me, foundation piecing is faster because I get the best results the first time, and I don't have to do it over and over again. So again, it's going to depend on your experience and your comfort level, what's actually faster. And also, like, fast isn't always the barometer that we use when deciding how to make a quilt. It might be accuracy, it might be ease. I mean, there's different things that we need. So
great. All right, a couple more questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, Mindy's asking, if you want a larger block than your pattern block, can you just enlarge the pattern and then copy to the foundation paper, or is there a different way to go about that?
Okay, so that's a good question. So let's say you wanted to make this as 18 inches, right? So you scale it up to 1.5. In that case, it would be, first of all, it'd be bigger than the paper. So it would cross two pieces of paper. That's really common with larger foundation paper piecing patterns where it crosses a couple pieces of paper and you have to glue them together along the seams. That's really normal, not a big deal. So yes, you can do that. And then repeat the question to me, Dana, because I know I only answered part of it.
That's okay. If you want the larger block than your pattern, can you just enlarge the pattern and then copy to the foundation paper, or is there a different way to do this?
So then the one other thing that you're going to want to notice is, so on here, you'll see that there's a little light gray line, and that's your 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you blow this up bigger, that 1/4 inch seam allowance isn't going to be a 1/4 inch anymore. So you just want to redraw 1/4 inch lines around all your pieces, because otherwise when you go to sew all those pieces together, they're not going to fit right, because you're going to have that extra ease in there from not having that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this part, what for this pattern is like the colorful part, you can scale up, scale down, not a big deal. It's just that you're going to want to realign all those 1/4 inches. So you could also take my 3-inch version of this, make it even smaller and bring it all the way down to 1.5 inches. But then those 1/4 inch seam marks, you'll want to redraw those bigger again to the 1/4 inch.
There's a relevant question to that, which is it always suggested to start a seam approximately a 1/4 inch beyond the sewing line?
You always want to do it at least a 1/4 inch before and a 1/4 inch after. And the reason is, so this seam right here, if I would have ended it where the paper ended, it would have ended right here. And then there wouldn't have been enough for this. If I would have stopped the thread here, this seam would not have crossed over. And I'd end up with a little hole right here because the seam didn't go all the way through. So that's why you want to do at least a 1/4 inch before and a 1/4 inch after. You can do a 1/2 inch, or you can go a full inch if you wanted to go crazy, but you're just going to be trimming it off anyway. So at least a 1/4 inch.
Great. And then Diane's asking, what is the blue and pink quilt on the wall to your right?
This one right here. So this is called the collection quilt. It's only available as a PDF. And so you'd have to get this from my site, carolinamorepatterns.com. And I collect scissors. So this has instructions for adding little ribbons when you put it together. So I tied my scissor collection on here. And so yeah, this is the collection quilt, and it has all these little scissors. And because I love adding a little extra to my quilt patterns whenever possible, you can actually see right back here is a mini version. So you get the mini version and the big version both in the same pattern. And the mini version is for my pin collection. So I put all of those cool, I would show it to you, but I think some of them have some inappropriate things on there. So I'm not going to bring it up closer. I have some inappropriate pins that some friends have sent me. But my pin collection is on this version of the collection quilt. So it's this pattern and this pattern all in one pattern called the collection quilt.
Wonderful. Great. And she says this is adorable. Thank you.
Thank you. I had all these cute scissors, and I wanted a way to like display them and enjoy them, not like, you know, in mugs on my table, which you can't display and enjoy all the cute scissors. But yeah, I have not all of them even fit on there anymore because I keep collecting more fun decorative little scissors.
So pretty. Great. Well, as of right now, those are all the questions. Oh, here we go. One more question. Beverly's asking, how did you do your shirt?
Well, so this shirt is also, we're just going to do sales pitch today. This is my logo, which is also on the big quilt behind me. And this is on carolinamorepatterns.com. If you want a quilty shirt, I didn't put my actual branding on here because I feel like who's really going to want to wear like my brand name on their shirt? But this is the quilt part of my logo. And so that's on the shirt. As long as we're talking about things around the room, this is every month I do a free 12-inch quilt block. And so this was one from a couple years ago. I want to say it's called Lucky because it's a horseshoe with a 4-leaf clover and a rainbow through it. But so I do all kinds of free 12-inch blocks. And then she might be asking, instead of this shirt, about the sweater that I showed earlier that I think I tucked away for myself that has all those stars that I put on the sweater. That is on YouTube. It's the quilted hoodie. So the quilted hoodie is on YouTube. Just put Carolina Moore quilted hoodie and the whole video will come up showing you step by step how to make your own quilted hoodie. So if that's what you were talking about, that's where you can find that one.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, folks are, everyone has such sweet things to say. You know, somebody's like, oh, I love the scissors. That's so sweet. Diana says, you seem to have fun and enjoy your quilting. It reflects your personality. Thanks for a great class.
Thank you. I truly love what I get to do. I get to hang out with quilters like y'all all the time, which is my favorite. I get to come up with new tools and notions to make quilting easier. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know like all the old school ways to do so many things. And sometimes, you know, technology or even reinventing like licking a piece of paper is a way that we can make quilting easier for all of us. And if it's easier, it's more fun. And then I just come up with really cool, fun designs and patterns and share them with folks. So like, I never knew that this was a job until I fell into it, and I just have the best job in the world, and I'm so glad.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I think that's a great place to end. I am just going to pull up this final screen, which has this has Carolina's social media handles on it. So she's mentioned several wonderful YouTube videos, TikTok, Instagram. Go on her Instagram page and look at the video of her doing the wildflowers quilt. I watched it like a week ago, Carolina. It is so cool. It is so cool. So she's Craft More at most of her social handles. It's always Expect More on Facebook. If you guys have questions about anything Fave Craft Studio Live, you can contact me at dneald@primecp.com. And to get Carolina's patterns and the foundation water piecing pen and the precision tweezers and anything else, visit carolinamorepatterns.com. All right, Carolina, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
It was so great. I'm so glad folks seem to love it. Everyone's saying thank you. Great class. Enjoyed it. So thank you, everybody, for
Thanks for being here.
And we'll send out that recording tomorrow so folks can rewatch. All right. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much again.